I didn't break the planet. It was this way when I found it, all right?
Everybody laughed when I first said I wanted to be a comedian. Well, they're not laughing now, are they?
You know why it's laminated, don't you? To catch the tears of joy.
It's a Celtic phoenix. People are thankfully being stupid again.
Welcome to Gurus of Comedy.
With your host, Dave Keeshan.
Welcome to Gurus of Comedy. I'm your host, Dave Keeshan, and today on the line I have Irish podcaster Rachel Lally. Welcome, Rachel.
Hi, Dave. How are you?
Excellent. Thanks very much for coming on today. Rachel and I have actually made contact. We're both Irish podcasters, working on a few podcasting ideas together, but Rachel has come on today. Rachel is a model, actor, street performer, artist, content creator, and most importantly, podcaster. Her podcast, 6 and 1 half dozen the other, is a Zoom format? You've 4V...
Yeah, it basically started as a lockdown project. We were 4 artists, and we kind of were used to spending all of our evenings at each other's gigs. So when the lockdown happened, we were like, what do we do now with our time? So we were kind of calling each other a lot anyway and having these kind of crazy discussions. We all like to debate, and we all have very different viewpoints and political opinions and leanings, I suppose. So we decided to turn it into a sort of a podcast, but also a YouTube channel. So we're 6 of 1 half a dozen of the other on YouTube, if anyone feels like checking it out. And basically just every week we talk about a philosophical thought experiment.
Cool.
And we put it to everyone and we discuss it. And it usually goes off on a mad tangent somewhere.
That's interesting because I was doing a lot of gigs, and I was finding that the conversations we were having after the gigs were over was actually more interesting for me than the night performing. And I felt like, this is kind of something that's missing, that might be interesting.
Yeah, I think that's often the way with creative people, because you think so much about so many different things, and you've so many levels of intelligence that you bring to your work that you often find, like people that you meet or you work with or perform with, you end up having these really interesting conversations about each other's work and each other's ideas. That's what it's all about, really.
Being in lockdown cut off that faucet. So today, Rachel has come on to discuss a concept that people might know or might not, called clowning. So a lot of people would know circus clowns and rodeo clowns, but clowning itself is more nebulous than that. Could you just give us a bit of a background of how you came to clowning and what it is?
Yes. So obviously I've been acting for a very long time. So I would have come into contact through acting workshops. But my major experience of what I'm going to talk about today is when I was on my master's program, my master's in theatre between NUI Maynooth and the Gaelic School of Acting. Part of that course was to do some training with Raymond Keane, who is an amazing Irish clown. And the course was called I, a Clown. And I went into it with, as you have just suggested, this idea of the circus clown, the buffoon, the kind of the Ronald McDonald idea of a clown. And I should have known better because I studied theatre for so long. But the course completely changed my expectations and was very different to what I had expected it to be.
So I would have heard of this before because I believe Sacha Baron Cohen went off to some famous guy in Paris called Philippe Gaulier, I hope that's pronounced, Philippe Gaulier, to work on his clowning style. And a lot of what he learned there is kind of what you would see in Borat, that kind of gawky person walking around the world. It's almost played for laughs, but people don't quite get it.
Yeah, so Sacha Baron Cohen is a really interesting image of a clown. I suppose a lot of people wouldn't know that that's what he is or that's how he's approaching his work. But there's a lot of stuff that he brings in which is related to clowning. And one of the first things you learn about clowning is that you can't be a clown unless you are authentic and true and tell the truth.
Well, he is famous for that. He completely throws himself into it. So, what was your kind of path into it, and what did you kind of learn yourself?
Well, so it was a massive shock, I suppose, from the first day. So we walked into this clowning class, and our master's course was quite small. There was only 12 of us. And we were all there every day. Our workshops are very practical. We often began at 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the morning. We were there beforehand to kind of warm up and get ourselves centered and get ready for the day. And on the first day of clowning, I had no idea what to expect. I thought we were going to be kind of joking around, maybe doing some circus skills, like that. And by the end of the first class, one of the people on our course who had been a teacher in a very renowned acting institution in Dublin for very many years was on stage in front of us, like absolutely bawling, crying. And by the end of the class, I was like, oh my God, what have I got myself into? What is this? And I was really fascinated with it. And that was just a result of a simple exercise where we were asked to go behind a flat or like a barrier, or like go off stage, put on a hat and a nose, and to come out and do nothing and just be present and be with the audience. And just having that moment of actually being present and noticing the audience and what they're giving back to you is madly powerful. It's crazy. I can't describe that feeling. And Raymond was quite tough, I suppose, as a facilitator, in that he was constantly pulling you back to that moment of authenticity. So as soon as you started to do something that was inauthentic, so the things that we do, like when we're performing, that are very obviously inauthentic, are kind of habits or things that we do when we're nervous, like talking quickly or trying to be funny to break the tension, or cracking a joke, or moving in a strange way, or trying to pass the focus to someone else so we can avoid everybody watching us. He would be really tough and say, like, you're not being truthful now. Go back to this person, or look at them, or stop doing that. You're not being real. Just be there. And I think for a lot of people in the course, and for me definitely, I've been acting for such a long time and I've been performing for such a long time. I thought I had this down, and it was a relearning of, I suppose, a respect for the audience, and actually really being with them and being very perceptive to their enjoyment.
I've seen this a little bit with comedy, like particularly when you're starting out, it's the silence in the room, kind of, you feel like you're not getting the audience, and a lot of people are afraid of it, and they'll just keep rattling on. And it's like sometimes, like some of the great guys I've seen, like the silence is almost as powerful as the talking, used correctly, of course.
Silence is one of the most powerful tools you have, I think.
And the people who kind of can just stand there and just, even take like 20 seconds, which some people are going, oh, say something. They are like true masters of their craft when they just kind of know it works. But, I think it probably, I've seen it in business. People use silence as a negotiation technique, whereas you say something and you let the other guy, you don't say anything. Sometimes they talk themselves into what you want them to do because they just want to say anything to break the silence.
Yeah, it's very, like, even I'm a drama facilitator as well. So I teach drama too. And like, that's one of the first things that I would try and teach people, comfortable with, not necessarily the silence, but with focus. So with people watching you, because that's something that we do in everyday life, have people sit and watch us. It's a really threatening thing in normal society. So if you're out somewhere and someone is staring at you, that's a threat. It's usually dangerous. It's a sign they need to either fight or get out of there. So we have all these natural instincts when we're on a stage in front of people, especially if we've not been doing it for a long time, and we completely go into fight or flight response. And part of that is the filling of the silence, but what we're really trying to do there is deflect the focus, so it's not on us.
So it sounds to me a little bit that like the improv world has probably taken a fair bit out of clowning as well.
Yeah, I mean, clowning for me is just a very, like, after doing that course, I think every performer should learn some clowning, because for me it just meant I couldn't lie to myself more on a stage. I had to stand and recognize when an audience was laughing to be polite, or because they're like, oh, this is awkward. Well done. This, like, I'm going to laugh at this joke, because if I don't, this person's going to die and then we're all going to feel terrible. And when they're genuinely laughing.
I've never had a mercy. I don't think I've ever had a mercy laugh. It's always like,
it happens, and you notice yourself doing it too. Like, so we had all these mad, like assignments we had to do every week. So I remember one week Raymond was like, okay, next week you have to bring in the best thing. And I was like, the best thing? You're going around your house like all week, like picking up stuff, going, chopped bread. Like you're going around your house like picking up all these things, going like, oh my God. So like, and often like it would get to the day of the class and you would just pick up whatever, like in a complete panic, have to bring something in. And then you had to use it in a certain way. But it was just about, a lot of it was kind of what people thought would be funny or thought would be engaging or entertaining often ended up not being, because your audience is much more intelligent than you often give them credit for. And they've already anticipated all of the possible things that you can do with that object before you've done any of them.
I wonder now, I was just thinking recently about a book, Fight Club.
Yeah.
But there is a bit where he starts giving people tasks to do and go out. And it's a kind of pick fights as in the movie. But there definitely seemed to be something in that movie about testing society and testing norms. It definitely sounds similar to that.
Yeah, so a huge part of like clowning goes back for years and years. Like our first evidence of clowns goes way back to ancient Greece, Egypt. Comedy has always been part of the human experience and society as a whole. Like clowns had really important roles. You know, we've all seen like the jester in the court, in movie scenes and stuff like that. We know about the Harlequin, which comes from Arlecchino, which comes from the Zani in Commedia dell'arte, which is like a Italian style of theatre that pantomime comes from. So like it's been woven through our society for years and years. And the role of the clown really is often to be satirical or to make fun of the people in power, and in turn allow us to question the people in power in a kind of safe way.
Yeah, because he's almost been given license or sanction to kind of say these things.
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff with clowning that has to do with embarrassment and failure, which I think as a society we've moved so far away from the ability or letting ourselves have the ability to fail or to be embarrassed. I think if you look at a lot of people's fears in their day-to-day life, the reason why most people avoid doing certain things or they're anxious about certain things, it usually goes back to the fear of embarrassment. And the clown has to be not only comfortable with embarrassment, but almost invite it. And that's very connected to failure. So being able to show the failure or being able to show something going wrong or the end result of a certain behavior. So like if a clown is taking off, you know, a drunk or a bad monarch or something, that they're able to take it to its full extreme and show this is what will happen if this continues, or if this behavior continues, this is where it could go. And that can often be really funny, because what's funny is it's true and we recognize the truth in it.
Yeah, well, I think there's always a special type of person that doesn't care and is absolutely happy. But like, I think you actually bring a very interesting point about society, particularly with the rise of social media and Facebook. Like I remember there used to be a time that what happened in your teens, college, before cameras existed, stayed there. Whereas now kids are coming through and everything is recorded pretty much from the age of 12 up. So anything they did seems to exist out in the ether there somewhere. So the young kids coming through now are becoming a lot more social media savvy, that they are controlling what is even presented to the world, because they're afraid of it being brought back against them down the line.
Yeah, there isn't the same room for personal failure or to make mistakes in the same way that we had freedom. You know, when I think of like I'm so glad there are no YouTube channels or there are no photos of me kind of back then. It was all relatively new. And certainly, like, I think it was well after I finished college that even Facebook became a thing. But it's really important. Like, I suppose it's kind of a self-imposed censorship in a way, that you're watching yourself because you're afraid. And even, you know, like there's so many things I recorded that there's views that you have at certain times in your life that change over time. But I suppose there's a fear now that like someone can go back through all of your social media posts sort of, you know, 10 or 20 years later and go, I found a post back in, 10 years ago where you said this. And, that's really frightening.
Well, I find that like that is pretty bad for the general populace as a whole. But I actually find comedians are struggling there a lot because usually at the start you're trying out ideas and concepts and you're trying to push an edge, or this edge or that edge, and you won't necessarily be a true believer in it, but you're just there's something there. So I think is it James Gunn that directed the Guardians of the Galaxy, the first two movies? They found tweets of his from 2012 that when he was like a comedian, that he lost his gig. He lost his multi-million-dollar gig because it was brought back up and saying, no, they were kind of very offensive. He sort of said, look, I was trying stuff out then. That's not who I am anymore. But he was brought down on that, which I feel mixed on it. I didn't actually read the content. Maybe they were just unforgivable, but it just goes to show, I think someone said, particularly as a comedian, the joke that will destroy you has probably been written already. It's out there.
Yeah, it's so hard, I suppose. We've discussed this ourselves among my little group of artists and our podcast as well. When you say stuff and they kind of, we don't have the same freedom anymore, or we don't feel like we do, to debate things or to disagree with people, and we're afraid that's going to kind of come back and bite us in the ass if we do say something that later on we're like, oh, that was a bit, I don't know if I would say that now. I think another role of the clown, or like that kind of comedy or the jester kind of character, is to allow people to present or agree or disagree with that kind of behavior in front of an audience. So, for example, if you have like the court jester and they're making fun of the king or the queen and their behavior or their gluttony or something, for example, it's kind of an anarchist attitude, and they're kind of doing it in a playful, kind of teasing way. But then if the monarch or the king or sort of demonstrates that, I don't behave like that, that's a good way to behave, then they've kind of made an agreement with the audience in the room that they're not going to behave like that anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's really powerful as well. So it's interesting now in this time of where we can't perform live in front of audiences, and we can't have those kind of agreements in front of people, and we're kind of streaming from our sitting rooms and stuff, and we're not really getting that feedback live from people in the space, that opportunity could be lost, or how we're going to recreate it online. I think that's a really interesting thing for me at the moment.
I think the feedback is very interesting. Like I do know a lot of comics who kind of, they don't like their material when it's in development, because sometimes even just the structure of it's poor, and just the feedback of a small audience is, oh, that works, this works. And I said, when I'm ready to show it to you, I'm ready. But, and that's kind of, I suppose that is the art. I suppose that's any type of performance art. You kind of try out a thing, see what works, tool it, bring it back, bring it back. But yeah, you're right. The thing now is, if I find the feedback that's available quite poor. It's like you're shouting out into a void, and it might be consumed, but you're just not getting the good feedback until it's something terrible, and all of a sudden you're getting, warnings of being cancelled or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's like trying to paint blindfold, I suppose. Sometimes you've no idea how it really works on a canvas, unless it's up in front of a live crowd, in a way.
So getting back to the clowning course that you did, so what was the kind of the way you were towards the end of it? Like where were you all? Had you kind of found some deeper parts of yourself, and how did it feed into the rest of your work in like acting and street performing?
Yeah, for me, it ended up being, it made me question a lot about the way I perform and the way that I approach audiences. And it's encouraged me to do, what we were saying earlier, to spend more time just being present with the audience and finding where I'm making connections with people and where I'm losing them. And to be really brutally honest with myself about, I'm talking here, but actually nobody's interested, or they're all looking at me just to be polite, or that was a simple or attention laugh, whatever it was. So I can't lie to myself anymore as a performer. I find I've turned down a lot more projects because I've just been truthful to myself and said, this is not something that I want to do. I think that's a really important lesson to learn as well.
I like what? Well, what was something you would, for example, the type of thing you would turn
Just
down?
like just certain projects, maybe people would ask me to work on, or plays, and I might go, do you know what, I don't feel like this script is authentic, or I don't feel like we're working in a way where we're getting the best out of this, and I can't stand on stage, and because I don't feel we're kind of just trying to, I suppose the difference between performing something that is a spectacle and performing something that has value, connection, and engaging.
Okay, well, that's interesting. And turning down gigs is always kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, it's very hard, and like it's difficult because, and especially at the moment, precarious as well. It's very hard to turn down stuff. You don't know when the next offer will be, the next opportunity. But yeah, I think for me, it's been important to kind of really think about where I'm giving energy and value as a performer, that you're actually, bringing something to the stage and not just performing to be watched.
Did they get you to make up your face and wear the nose at the end? Did you have to put on a show of some kind?
So yeah, in clowning, you always have the red nose, and the red nose is considered a very interesting. I went with all the masks that we're wearing, but it's considered the smallest mask in the world.
Okay, that's interesting.
So that is the very minimalist thing that you add, or the very smallest thing. And usually just a hat or something as well. Obviously, you can go full clown and do the makeup and the costume and everything. I've never taken it that far. I suppose if you were to spend years studying, that's how you would develop your clown persona and character, and would become become a character that you know inside out.
Mm-hmm.
And you could add to that with makeup and costume and stuff.
And was there a kind of a graduation night of something, or a performance of some kind?
Yeah. And actually, for me, I did so well for the whole course, and I kind of almost avoided that moment of failure, because I don't know whether it was from instinct or I just got lucky, but a lot of the stuff I did in class really worked, probably because I was terrified, and it was really scary, and I was really vulnerable, and it was very visible, and people liked watching that. Like, I remember there was when I had to bring in the best thing ever. I brought in a piece of fabric and turned into a superhero, and I wore it as a cloak, and I turned into a witch, and then I wore it like a supermodel going down the catwalk. But there was kind of a tremble in my hand that I couldn't hide, because I was nervous at like ops failing. And that's what made it funny, that I was trying to be this super character. You could see the fear, which is like, if you ever watch those videos on YouTube of supermodels like wobbling on their shoes and falling over, it's like, it's such a contrasting image of these people that are supposed to be untouchable and beautiful and flawless, making a mistake and being frightened. That is funny, because that there is so much truth to that, and you can finally see the vulnerability, and that's where the comedy is. So I did so well throughout the classes, and I actually ended up getting an A in clowning. So I'm a grade A clown. I love but my actual final performance was a complete and utter disaster. So we had decided, we worked in pairs, and I worked with another great actor, and we had designed this whole thing around a light bulb that lit up when one of us held it, and it was kind of to show the status that things worked for one of the characters, and the other character was kind of the buffoon character, and things didn't work so well for him. But from the beginning, the technician messed up one of the cues. So the light was on when it was supposed to go off, and that just had a whole knock-on effect for the entire show. And it was horrific, and it was horrible.
Technical stuff.
And but you know what? It was really valuable for me as a performer, because I finally got to fail epically.
So got that out of the way. Don't have to do that ever again. Done.
Yeah.
If only. Yeah, I performed one time and just the mic cut out halfway through, and it just didn't come back on, and everyone's just saying, "Could you hear me at the back?" People nodded, said, well, "Okay." It was just like, what do you do?
You just have to, you have to roll with it. I think the thing I learned was that you have to adapt. You can't continue as if things are working when they're not, because you wouldn't notice a thing. So you have to be that adaptable. But carry on. And if it's not working, get on stage.
if you can. If not, someone standing there, you got to do 5 more minutes.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's not possible, but you know, sometimes we kind of try to drag things out when we're like, you know what, not working for me today. So good mind.
So currently, what is your main performance style that you've performed in Jester style?
Yes, we've been working with Giant Wolf Theatre Company, and we've been doing something called Playback Theatre, where it originally comes from kind of a form of drama therapy, but we've been using it in more of a comedy context. And there are a lot of purists who would really disagree with that, and maybe don't like that we're kind of focusing on the comedy element of it. But it's been really interesting because the way it works is you go into a space and it's very structured in terms of how the actors respond to the stories, but you don't have time to sort of huddle or discuss between yourselves. You just have to play back. So somebody in the audience will give you a story. They'll tell you like an anecdote about whatever it is, and we've had different topics. We had a great one for Valentine's Day, for example, where people told us like their dating nightmares on their bad Tinder stories and stuff. And so they tell us the stories and we just play them back. And part of that, showing the person whose story it is, the situation from another character's perspective,
Okay.
or from an inanimate object's perspective, or messing with the timeline, or playing back something someone said but with a different intonation or a different speed or something, so that the meaning changes. And that can be so funny, but also very insightful for the person watching. So they can watch it and go, oh my gosh, I never thought of it like that. Or when I hear what I said played back to me, now I realize maybe I said the wrong thing. Or when I see how that person spoke to me, I now realize actually how rude that was or how small I felt. And we can play with that on stage as well. Like if somebody is not feeling very powerful in a certain situation, that will make the character small and meek and give them a strange voice or whatever. And it can all be really revealing in people's stories.
And how much of the clowning course do you think fed into some of the techniques you use there?
A lot of it. I mean, I think just clowning in general just has changed my whole approach to performance in terms of really putting the audience first, and that I, as a performer, I'm there to give them something. Mm-hmm. And if I'm not giving them something, then I need to stop or get off, because it's a waste of everyone's time. So when you invite people to come out to a show, whether it's a stand-up gig or it's a music event or like whatever it is, you're asking people to give up time, which is one of the most valuable things that we have. So even if your tickets are cheap, and they often aren't, and they're often expensive, and I completely agree with artists getting paid and making money and stuff, but part of that is you have to be good and you have to give them something to show up for.
Well, I think one of my favorite clowns ever said, if you're good at something, never do it for free.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's true. People don't respect free. If they've spent some money, they'll respect that they're invested in the night. Whereas if people are turning up to a free event, it's amazing in performance. So you're actually doing them a favor a bit, even charging €5 or something.
Yeah. People value things that they have to pay for, and there's a certain there's a whole economics theory, that people value things less, even with like a study between prescription drugs and generic drugs. So you go in and buy the generic paracetamol, and people will perceive it as having worked less than the branded paracetamol, even though they're exactly the same in a way. There is a placebo effect to that. Like
my brother-in-law works in one of those big pharmaceuticals. That bucket there, that's the non-branded. That one, it's the same bucket,
Yeah, this is one of them has a stamp on it.
Okay, well, Rachel, thanks for coming on today to discuss clowning and all that. You are on the socials. How do people follow you online?
So the best way to get me is on Instagram. That's where I'm most active. And I'm Rachel Lally 4. That's RACHELLALLY 4. And you can catch our podcast on 6 of one, half a dozen of the other on YouTube. And we're available all good podcast streaming platforms. Also.
Excellent. And I will include all those in the show notes. My name's Dave Keeshan. I am on the Twitter as Dave Keeshan. I got that one. We are also, this podcast, Gurus of Comedies, on Apple, Spotify, all good guys. So if you could leave us reviews, that would be great. And we will leave you at that. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you so much.
And goodbye.